Alright guys, welcome to the video. So today I want to talk a little bit more in depth about how I personally evaluate a march on the field. So obviously a march comprises of two commanders, the primary and secondary commander, right? And then as a pair, how do they actually function on the field? So I talked a little bit about this as far as like investing in commanders, right? You have to see, okay, what are the actual available pairings right now? How future-proof is that commander? All of these factors. Well, when you're evaluating a commander, there's also a couple factors that you look at, right? So just to clarify, when I'm talking about a commander as a pair, really what I care about is open fielding. So right here we have like a 1093 fight, right? It's a ball. There's a lot of people. It's not dueling. It's actually in a big ball fight context. So uh, one of the best dueling marches in the game right now is going to be Hua, Nevsky, right? Two high damage single target commanders. But you're rarely going to see that on the field because even though it's really, really good at dueling and it's going to get really good reports, it's not contributing as much overall on the field when you're evaluating it in that context, right? So whenever I'm talking about whether a march is good or not, that's what I have in mind. Okay, so when you're evaluating a march, I think you could break it down to three buckets, right? So the first one is what I'm going to call like the eyeball test or just the field test, right? So when you're moving a march around on the field, does it move fast enough, right? Some commanders or some commander pairings, like so, some people, when William Wallace first came out, their feedback was they were so used to using Lucha Alex that when they paired Lucha with William Wallace, it felt much slower and they just didn't enjoy using it as much. That doesn't necessarily show up in the stats, right? You're not going to be like, oh, well, it's at this percentage march speed. It's just not going to be good enough. And really, it's subjective. Some people have a higher tolerance for it. Some people have a lower tolerance for it, right? Another one is does one march seem to always turn yellow first, right, or turn red first? So like I think the best example of this will be XY. So right, Shang Yu or XY, he's a Cav commander that's very very squishy. He's actually his kit's pretty good. You actually just saw a XY on the field here, but especially before dot mode became a lot more prevalent, he was the number one target on the field, right? So even though his kit's pretty good, does a lot of damage, he was like the latest greatest, because he was so squishy and everyone wanted to target him, a lot of people from using XY just didn't enjoy or didn't like using them. That's really a subjective thing. Some people like XY, some people don't. Some people prefer more march speed, some people prefer less. But that's like the eyeball or the field test, right? So like personally, let's go actually go back to Home Kingdom for me. Right, Lucha Alex is my favorite march. It's not the fastest march out there, but it's one of the fastest infantry marches you can make. Moving this around, the instant proc and everything, it's a fun march to use, right? Whereas like for example, what's considered the best archer march, ZL or Zhuge Liang and Herman is supposed to be the best archer march. I don't personally enjoy using it that much. I use it because it's just the best archer march out there, but from a field test standpoint, not my favorite. Okay. The second part is very objective, right? So you're essentially taking reports, you compile them together. Back in the day, people actually would just take, tens, hundreds of reports, compile them together, and do a objective testing. Now we have something called Cubus Mike, right? So he has a Discord. I've been plugging him for a while. Last I checked, his price was $50 a year, right? So essentially, you turn this program on, it's tracking all of your reports. So if I click on every one of these, but I can actually see the report. I can see the gear I was fighting against, the gear I was using, and then overall, right, from like October 21st until today, I can see how my Lucha Alex has done over that time period, right? So the KP ratio, I traded 4.01 to 1, right? That's KP. The kill ratio, as far as troops to troops, was 3.8 to 1. And that's different from KP because if I had like a T4, T5 mix, right, the KP could show up different than how many troops you're actually seb wounding versus how many you're taking, right? From here, I could also see how many kill points I got with that one march so far versus how many kill points I gave the opponent, right? This is very, very in-depth, and this is really objective, right? So when you want to say, hey, I think Hua Joan is better than Nevsky Joan, well, when you can run Hua Joan for a whole day and then Nevsky Joan for a whole day, and then you can compare the reports side by side using the same equipment and armaments, all of a sudden, objectively, you can start making that claim a lot more, right? So I don't really know how you can do this without compiling the reports or using a reports manager, or else, right? A lot of it is just talking about stuff on paper or theory crafting, which I'm going to get to next. But like, I feel like this is a critical component of evaluating whether a march is good. So the first part is a field test, right? That's your personal preference. Second part is the reports manager. We're looking at reports, actually getting an objective view of how that march is doing. Now, something, no matter how good the reports manager or the battle simulator or anything is, you can't get is how one march is actually benefiting or negatively affecting like the group on the field, right? So I just showed earlier on like the 1093 fight, right? I can run a march that does really, really good as far as its trades by itself, but it doesn't really measure how much other marches are benefiting from it, right? So this comes a lot from when a march has a buff or a debuff. And in general, just think the most powerful buff or debuffs you can have are actually debuffs that make the opponent take more damage. So something like Boudica's skill damage taken increase, Nevsky's defense reduction, or Scipio's health reduction. Those are all very, very powerful. And the reason why is because as soon as I put, for example, Nevsky's primary skill, right? And when you have 3 targets surrounding something, it's 45% defense reduction. If I have, the more marches I have, right? Because I'm controlling all 3, 4, 5, up to 7 marches of mine. If I'm targeting another march and I'm putting this defense reduction on there and I'm running 6 marches, I'm guaranteed that at least 6 of the marches are benefiting from it, right? That's not even counting all the marches that I'm not controlling that could also be hitting the same target. Whereas when you're buffing yourself or you're buffing your allies, right? So like, for example, if you look at Joan's primary skill, after she launches an active skill, 3 nearby allies or friendly troops deal 5% more damage and gain 20 extra rage per second. That's cool, right? Because you're benefiting 3 marches, but like the actual value you're providing on the field, it can't compare to something, for example, say like Belisarius Prime, where his expertise, right? When you have 5 plus troops around a target, every one of those troops is dealing 12% more all damage to that target, right? So in general, when you're thinking buff or debuff, I would much more prefer a debuff that's making the target take a lot more damage because it essentially scales exponentially, right? Well, I guess you could cap it out at 12 marches. I don't think you could surround a troop with more than 12 marches. Maybe I'm wrong, but regardless, you can get up to 12 or more, maybe, troops benefiting from this, right? And that's why one of the reasons why when Ragnar came out, I'm not necessarily so high on him, because if you look at Ragnar's kit, he is just straight up dealing damage, right? But his debuff, if you want to call it that, it's like has kind of like a drain or a vampire effect, right? You're slowing the enemy down, which you can make a case can make it easier for everyone else to catch them, but you're essentially just taking away the attack from the enemy. So yes, that one march is doing a little less damage, but it's actually not taking more damage in a way where a bunch of marches could benefit from it. That's why, like, when you have Hoa versus Nevsky, I think it's no-brainer. Nevsky is way better because that theory crafting part where you're measuring like in that open field fighting, right, where lots of marches on the field, Nevsky is providing way more open field benefits. That's kind of hard to measure. When you're talking about a march like Lucia Alex versus Lucia Scipio, that one to me is very, very clear cut, because when you go to the reports manager, right, I've run this over many, many days. The Lucia Alex is doing more damage and it's just trading better, right? So it's actually dealing more sev wounds and trading better compared to the Lucia Scipio. From a debuff standpoint, right, Alex has a debuff where for 4 seconds, 3 targets are taking 30% more damage, right? 3 targets taking 30% more damage for 4 seconds. Now you compare that to Scipio's active skill, right? Potentially up to 3 targets could lose 30% health for 3 seconds. So instead of 4 seconds, it's 3 seconds. By my estimate, 30% health for like a max tech player with decent gear, they're taking somewhere between 16 and 18% more damage for 3 seconds, right? Like from a debuff standpoint, Alex's debuff is much better. So a lot of people want to talk about Scipio's AoE, but if objectively I'm looking at the reports manager, the Lucia Alex is just dealing more damage and trading better. So it's not even just a better ratio, it's actually just dealing more damage. And then also Alex has a better debuff. And then from a field standpoint, Alex is faster than Scipio, so it's actually more fun to use. Right? I think it's like a no-brainer, right? But like, if you're comparing these two commanders one-to-one, who's better, Scipio or Alex? No context, Scipio is way better. But when it comes to a pairing with Lucia, using the kind of like the criteria that I laid out earlier, that's why I actually think Lucia Alex is still the best march in the game. It's the reason why I didn't invest in William Wallace. And even now, right, I can run Lucia Scipio, but I choose to run Lucia Alex. Okay, so that's my way of evaluating how good a March is. I think you have to have the field test. I think you have to have a objective look at the reports, right? And then you have to actually then be able to theory craft how much impact that this March with this March has on the rest of the field that you can't measure from the field test and the objective reports that you're looking at. All right, so hopefully that kind of simplifies or clarifies in a way like how to think about or evaluate a March. I know there's lots of people out there that'll say, well, Ragnar does more damage, right? It's doing 600 more damage per target than Scipio, so that much more damage is just a lot better, right? Well, okay, how do you measure 600 more additional damage per target versus a 3-target debuff, right? Health debuff that's making them take 16 to 18% more damage for 3 seconds, right? When you start comparing the two, me personally, I lean very strongly towards the debuff because it's actually, mathematically just going to provide a lot more value. But this is where the game could kind of get fun, and this is where there's not universal agreement because people could value different things. All right, so if you watched all the way to the end, you haven't yet, please like and subscribe to the video. Thank you for watching, and I'll talk to you guys next time.